It's 1:47 a.m. You pick up your phone, you open the conversation. The message is already there, waiting. You had it typed for an hour. You've rewritten it 9 times, but you still haven't sent it. It starts with their name, it ends with a question you already know they won't answer. But you need to ask it anyway, because somewhere in your mind, there's still a version of this story that makes sense. A conversation where they finally tell you the truth. One honest explanation for everything that happened. And if you could just get that answer, this would finally be over. You could stop replaying every moment, stop checking their profile at midnight, stop wondering what you did wrong. You want to stop, but you can't, because that answer has a name. Everyone calls it closure. And almost nobody understands what it actually is. Or do they?
In 1927, a Soviet psychologist named Bluma Zygarnik noticed something strange. She was watching waiters in a Berlin restaurant. While customers were still seated, the waiters remembered every order perfectly. But the moment the bill was paid and the table was cleared, the memories vanished completely. Her conclusion: the brain doesn't store finished and unfinished tasks the same way. Incomplete loops stay active, consuming mental energy until they get a resolution signal. So what does this mean? It means your relationship is over, but your brain hasn't received the signal. It's still processing, still running the loop. Every unanswered question is a thread the brain keeps pulling, waiting for it to lead somewhere. The more you replay it, the more it refuses to close. That's not weakness. That's a neurological process with your name on it. But that's not the part that should disturb you most, because while your brain burns energy on that unresolved loop, something else is operating underneath. Something that sounds less like neuroscience and more like accounting. You're doing math.
Think about it honestly. 2 years? Maybe 3? The nights you talked yourself into staying. The birthdays you showed up for when you weren't sure you should. The friends you stopped seeing because it was easier than explaining the tension. The versions of yourself you quietly folded to make it work. All of that gets tallied somewhere beneath conscious thought into a total. And when you consider walking away for good, your brain doesn't calculate what you stand to gain. It calculates what you've already spent. Economists call this the sunk cost fallacy. In 1985, researchers Hal Arkus and Catherine Bloomer published findings that unsettled decision theorists everywhere. People consistently made worse choices when they had already invested time, money, or effort into something. Not because the investment improved the outcome, because the investment itself became the reason to stay. The deeper you're in, the more irrational exit becomes. Not because leaving gets harder, because admitting the loss gets more painful. You're not waiting for closure because you need the explanation. You're waiting because leaving without it means admitting every sacrifice led to nothing. Every compromise, every night you argued yourself back into believing it was worth it. And the mind will perform extraordinary gymnastics to avoid that conclusion. So, you ask for one more conversation. You call it healing. But what you're actually doing is looking for a way to break even on an investment that was never going to return your money. But here's where it gets genuinely strange. None of this explains the most important question. Not why you stayed, why you chose this person in the first place. You noticed the red flags. Maybe it was the inconsistency in how they showed up, the warmth that disappeared overnight with no warning, the way they made you feel chosen one moment and invisible the next. You saw all of it, and you felt pulled in anyway. Here's what attachment researchers have found. Intensity does not equal love, but the brain doesn't make that distinction automatically. The cortisol spikes, the hypervigilance, the tunnel focus are neurologically identical to genuine excitement. The brain measures the volume of emotion, not its quality. The chemistry wasn't imaginary. It was misread. You didn't confuse love with chemistry. You confused love with activation. Carl Jung spent decades studying what he called the shadow. The unconscious patterns formed so early, absorbed so quietly, they become invisible to us. The shadow holds your oldest emotional templates, your first experiences of what intimacy felt like, whether closeness came with safety or with unpredictability, whether affection was freely given or something you had to earn back over and over. And Jung kept returning to a conclusion most people resist. We don't seek what's healthy. We seek what's familiar.
If the love you first learned came packaged with disappearance, with warmth that arrived in bursts and withdrew without explanation, with someone who was everything you needed sometimes and completely unreachable the rest, then your nervous system built a map from that. And when it encounters a similar pattern in adulthood, it doesn't register warning. It registers recognition. Recognition that feels neurologically like electricity, like chemistry, like coming home. You didn't ignore the red flags. You recognized them, and you ignored them anyway, because that pull wasn't attraction in the simple sense. It was memory. Your nervous system meeting a pattern it already knew how to navigate, something it had spent years being trained to pursue. And then a specific mechanism sealed it in place.
In 1997, psychologist Patrick Carnes introduced the term trauma bonding. It describes what happens inside a relationship built around alternating pain and relief. The cycle is predictable. Tension builds, something breaks, and then the repair arrives. The warmth returns. The apology comes. The version of this person you fell for reappears, just long enough to remind you why you stayed. One more time, and another, and another, and another. But how many times will it take before you finally see the pattern? That repair hits the nervous system like oxygen after being held underwater. Oxytocin floods, dopamine spikes, and the brain bonds you to the source of that relief, the same person who caused the rupture. This is not a character flaw. This is biology operating exactly as designed. Variable reinforcement, the most addictive conditioning schedule known to behavioral science. The slot machine that pays out just enough to keep you pulling. Your nervous system calibrates to their specific rhythm. Their mood becomes your weather. Their warmth becomes the thing your body is always quietly waiting for. And the person who holds that cycle becomes the only one who feels real. So now you're asking that person for closure? You're waiting for someone who rewired your nervous system through repetition, whose inconsistency your brain translated as chemistry, whose relief cycles your biology mistook for love, to sit down and explain why they did it? You're asking the slot machine to explain the algorithm. Closure is not a conversation. It is a decision. You have been waiting for the person who broke the thing to come back with the words that rebuild it. But sometimes there is no explanation worth having. The only honest answer is that the door was open the entire time, and you chose again and again to stay inside. Not because you didn't see it, because leaving meant closing the loop yourself. Without the resolution, your brain was built to demand, without permission from anyone other than you. The closure you're waiting for isn't something they can give you. It is the moment you decide you no longer need them to. And the recognition that started all of this, that pull, that electricity, that sense of arriving somewhere you'd been before, that was never a flaw in your judgment. It was information, a map pointing to the wound that was still open long before they arrived, not a compass pointing you back to them. The loop doesn't close when they finally say the right thing. It closes when you stop needing them to. That message is still sitting there, an hour old, 9 rewrites deep. Just believe me, it doesn't need to be sent. It doesn't even need to be deleted. It just needs to stop being the thing you're waiting on. If you understood everything, then you'll be able to find real love. Not the kind you only think is real. But there's still one thing left before you leave. Subscribe, because the next video exposes the psychology behind manipulation in your relationship. The most dangerous manipulators don't control your actions. They control what you believe was your own decision. Click the video on your screen.